What's up, comic book fans? As you can tell by the title of this video, today I'll be asking the big question. Does the DC Extended Universe have a villain problem? Now that Wonder Woman is out on Blu-ray, I was able to check it out again, and the first real big hit for the DC Extended Universe had just one major problem for me: the villain. While it was very cool to see Ares in the flesh on the big screen, it was a little more than distracting when we finally saw his face under the helmet. David Thewlis of Harry Potter fame did an excellent job in his role as Sir Patrick, but when he transformed into Ares, it was laughable. I'm not sure why DC chose to keep the same actor in both roles. The transformation was not very believable, and honestly, it was a little bit goofy. Without this major hiccup at the end of the film, Wonder Woman would have been a near perfect experience for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I really did like the movie, and it was a step in the right direction for DC and their extended universe, but they're still struggling with their villains, which is odd because in the past, the villains have been a big reason for DC's cinematic successes. Performances from Heath Ledger as the Joker, to Tom Hardy as Bane, to Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, and of course Jack Nicholson's iconic Joker performance are just a handful of the examples of DC's fantastic characterization of their iconic villains. But since then, we've made the jump to the DCEU, and they've struggled to adapt their villains, and the only real standout great performance to me is Michael Shannon as Zod.
My name is General Zod. For some time, your world has sheltered one of my citizens. I request that you return this individual to my custody.
So let's begin with Michael Shannon's Zod. General Zod was the commander of Krypton's military. Born and bred to fulfill his role, he was completely committed to both the safety of Krypton as well as its people. Zod worked closely with Superman's father, Jor-El, and when they finally learned of the imminent collapse of Krypton's core and the ultimate elimination of the Kryptonian race, they each reacted very differently. Jor-El looked to preserve the Kryptonians' legacy through his son, Kal-El, and was disgusted by Zod's willingness to start a war. Zod and his goons were eventually captured and banished just before Krypton went boom. Years later, they were able to escape, and they found themselves on Earth going toe-to-toe with the budding superhero, Superman. Zod was depicted flawlessly by Shannon and written very well. Michael Shannon was able to be subtle at times and then go over the top when he needed to. The character was nuanced. He wasn't just a big, dumb brute. He had real reasons for what he wanted to accomplish. He wanted Krypton to return to its former glory, and he would do anything to save his home planet. But after Man of Steel, DC really began to struggle with their villains. It's cherry. Alexander Joseph Luthor Jr., or just more simply Lex Luthor, is a megalomaniacal multi-billionaire businessman with an obsession with Superman, whose very existence makes Lex feel insignificant. So he goes out of his way to expose this godlike figure as a fraud and a threat to all of humanity. First by tricking Batman into fighting and hopefully killing Superman, and then again by unleashing Doomsday to destroy the Man of Steel. Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor is without a doubt the most criticized villain that DC has brought to the screen, which is surprising because this thing exists in the same universe. Eisenberg was lampooned by fans and critics alike for his over-the-top and often cartoonish depiction of Lex Luthor, who is normally a cold and calculating figure in the DC universe. And I know this is Junior and not Senior, but still we expected Lex and we got Riddler instead. His plans aside, the character was the opposite of threatening, and I didn't feel like he could actually take down Superman or Batman at any point. Batman was honestly more of a villain in Dawn of Justice than Lex was, and that's my biggest problem. Whether it was Zack Snyder who wanted Jesse's Lex Luthor to be over the top, or just a bold decision made by the actor, we'll probably never know. But for better or worse, most likely worse, it was a performance we'll never forget. Doomsday was revealed in an early trailer for Batman v Superman, which, in my opinion, was a huge mistake for DC. Not only did they spoil the ending of the movie, but nobody, and I mean nobody, liked the way he looked. Doomsday is supposed to look like this, but instead we got this. A grotesque hybrid of the new Ninja Turtles and the troll from Lord of the Rings. Not only that, but Doomsday's classic story was completely altered, and instead of being a creature created in the distant past by a brutal and hellish Kryptonian society, he was instead a disgusting hybrid of Zod and Lex Luthor's own DNA. Not only was his entire look botched, but his origin was almost unrecognizable, and his most famous feat, killing Superman, was ruined by the terrible rush job at the end of the movie.
Here's to honor among thieves.
Not beef.
I could go on for days about how each and every villain in the Suicide Squad movie was ruined in one fell swoop. Well, except for El Diablo, he was actually pretty badass. And also Captain Boomerang, he wasn't really what we were expecting, but he was definitely fun. But instead of that, we're going to focus on the antagonists of the film, Enchantress, Joker, and Amanda Waller. So let's begin with Enchantress. Enchantress was an oddball choice as the main antagonist for the film, reason being we were all fed lies for months that the Joker was the main villain of the film, and most fans were let down by DC's decision to have Enchantress in this role. Not only were her motivations pretty unrecognizable, but how she was portrayed was laughable. Her powers and weaknesses were not well defined, and she ultimately ended up being a CGI nightmare with a skybeam. Amanda Waller might have gotten it the worst out of everybody as far as how she was written in the DC Extended Universe. Waller is supposed to be this larger-than-life woman who stands up to anyone and everyone, including heroes like Batman. She's supposed to be someone who never backs down and who always has the upper hand. In Suicide Squad, she was a bumbling idiot who loses control over Enchantress. She gets herself into trouble and needs to be rescued by her own team, and then she murders an entire room of innocents just because she has to look worse than the actual villains saving her. Viola Davis did her best, and I can't fault her for what became of this character, but the writers really, really messed this character up. Finally, let's talk about the Joker. I've gone over this portrayal of the iconic clown so many times, but the long and short of it is he's just not the Joker. He's nothing like the Joker in any form of media ever. He's love-struck by Harley Quinn, and yes, he did create her, but he also risked life and limb to save her. The Joker would never do this. He doesn't actually care about Harley, and their relationship was so grossly misrepresented just to sell the idea of a perfect relationship to all these edgy kids at Hot Topic. I don't know whose idea it was to make the character this way, whether it was the writer, the producer, the director, the character designers, or the actor, or just some combination of all of those, but he's so unrecognizable as the Joker, it's just disgusting. I already talked about Ares earlier in the video, so we'll keep this very brief, and he was a small step in the right direction. DC just fumbled at the goal line with this guy. Like I said earlier, they got close to depicting another iconic villain on the silver screen, but they didn't get it quite right. So, does the DC Extended Universe have a villain problem? In my opinion, they do. They don't seem to understand what made their characters popular in the first place. They're so insistent on being edgy and different that they've lost the core and defining values of their villains. Marvel seems to have the same kind of issue with their villains, but DC has no excuse. They've executed their villains flawlessly so many times before, but since their new direction in the DCEU, their villains have gone from grounded and realistic to over-the-top and cartoonish. These villains have no subtleties. Everything about them is plastered directly on their foreheads. Literally. So what do you think? Does DC have a villain problem? Who's your favorite villain in the DC Extended Universe? I think Michael Shannon's Zod by far is the best villain that DC has made, and it's kind of went downhill from there. Ares kind of brought it back, but not really. What villains do you want to see next? Are you excited for Steppenwolf? Do you think he could kind of remedy this problem? Do you think DC can turn their villain issue around? Let me know down in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you did like this video. It does really help us out. Remember the motto, it's comics over everything, and I'll see you guys next time.